Up first, we're kicking things off with a keynote that truly sets the tone for everything we're about to explore today. In today's AI-fueled developer-first world, one truth cuts through the noise. Hands-on experience actually builds trust, and developer empathy is what turns that trust into adoption. Joining us to unpack this is someone who knows the journey inside and out, Arun Gupta. Arun is a globally recognized expert in developer relations, open source strategy, and go-to-market innovation. With over 25 years of experience at Intel, Apple, Amazon, and Red Hat, he's built developer communities that drive adoption and aligned DevRel with product, marketing, and sales to create lasting champions. Arun advocates mindfulness, kindness, and developer empathy as the foundation of modern DevRel. And not to brag on his behalf, but he's also climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, as you can see in the picture right here. Please give a warm welcome to Arun Gupta with his talk, Developer Empathy, the Key to Unlocking Go-to-Market Success. Take it away, Arun.
Thank you, Sean. I'm super excited to be here. And yes, that picture is indeed me on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. And you may be wondering, what is that related to do with developer empathy? But if you think about sort of the Kilimanjaro story, we started at about 6,000 feet elevation. We were climbing up 3,000 feet every day. It was a 7-day trek, and there were 12 of us. We were all going in together. Every night, we will check in with everyone. How are you doing? What were your weak points? What were your strong points? How could we make the day better? And that really goes back to empathy, that we were there to go all the way to the summit and back in 7 days. But without empathy, the idea was to not leave anybody behind. So it was really a very surreal moment when you reach the summit, but the journey is really the whole story here. Let's get back to the developer part of it. Most companies say they care about developers, but when you see them ship products, you see the opposite. You really see unnecessary friction, unclear docs, breaking changes with no notice. And that's not good feedback. Here's the thing, if you don't understand developers, they won't understand your product. And without them, your PLG, product-led growth, is dead before it starts. Let me give an analogy. I'm a runner. And by the way, I see a whole bunch of folks from California. So yeah, I'm an early riser. I did my 10K run this morning. If you are a runner, you would understand the criticality of right shoe fit for a runner, right? Developer empathy is a right shoe fit. You can run in the wrong shoes, but every step will feel harder and you will burn out sooner. I'm a lifter. Developer empathy is the proper form in a lift. If you're doing a squat, if you're doing a deadlift, you might still move the weight, but you will waste so much energy and you'll risk injury. And with it, everything is smoother and a lot more efficient. So think of it in that language, why developer empathy is critical. Now, if I were to think about developer empathy, it really means seeing the world through a developer's eyes, their tools, their constraints, their priorities, and building accordingly. It's not sympathy. It's not saying, I feel for you. It's not charity. It's empathy. And it says, I understand you enough to make better decisions on your behalf. And that's when you get on the act of understanding. You move into advocacy. You actually shape things in their favor. It's not about being nice. It's about being right for them. That's the critical part of it. Let's move to the next slide. If you think about 8 reasons why developers abandon your product, right? This is a big list here. And I've given 8 big categories, but if you look at it, you can look at a lot of the minor reasons why developer leave your product. I'm just gonna go into a couple of them. Under getting started hell, for example, how do you create a more seamless experience for the customers? Is it clunky? It is disjointed. It is frustrating. How long does it take to get to a hello world? Does it take 3 hours? My gosh, I've tried products where they're given like a 20-step process for a hello world. I am not going back to that product. If it's taking me a half a day to get to the hello world, I have lost it already. The saying is the docs make the project or break the project, no matter how good your product is. But if the docs are not clear, static docs are unengaging. You need something more immersive and engaging. You got to show the developers a path. Sure, I've finished the hello world. What next? Then what next? Then what next? Show them a trail map, essentially. If not, you just say, yeah, create a hello world and then go figure out on your own. Then again, you've lost the developer in that journey. On the same path, if you think about sort of integration problems, right? No sandbox environment. Your setup requires a complex setup. Install these packages, these drivers, this Docker container, these images, a whole bunch of series that needs to be done. But if you're not giving me a sandbox, if you're not giving me like a Git pod or a GitHub code spaces, click here and everything is provisioned for you, it's going to take me that much longer. So these are, again, some of the reasons, the way I've seen why developers abandon your product. But really doing an inventory of this, what are the reasons? I would encourage each one of you to take a look at it. How are you doing on these different 8 categories? Are there any reasons that you can take a look at it and fix it by yourself? So that's a critical element that you want to understand. So now let's go one by one on the next slide. What are the 4 pillars of developer empathy? Okay, so the first pillar that we talk about really is understanding the developer's context. What that means is know the developers operate in. What is the environment that they're operating in? Developers don't operate in a vacuum. They have existing tools, deadlines, constraints. So before you propose solutions, understand their workflows, priorities, and pain points. Empathy here means not just asking what they need, but recognizing what they are up against. This could be that, hey, they use a particular tool, so we need to fit it right into that tool. This could be that their primary operating system, your target customer primary operating system is Mac. So when you're launching a CLI that only works on Linux, but most of your developers are on Mac OS and Windows, boom, you've lost it again. So understand what their context is, who's your primary audience, and then operate with that. Let's talk about reducing friction. If you think in terms of where friction comes from, every unnecessary click adds to friction. Confusing error messages cause to friction. Unclear docs drains developer energy. Lots of different ways by which you can think about it. Developer empathy in that case means really designing APIs, docs, SDKs, and processes that feel smooth and predictable. Empathetic really means removing obstacles, not adding clever features. Think about time to hello world. The shorter it is, the more developers trust you. So, and again, as I quoted the example earlier, if I am using an SDK, it requires 12 manual steps before making the first API call. Oh, set up this environment file and set up this config variable, and you just keep going on. And then, or can I say one line npm install or pip install, and boom, your starter snippet that works out of the box. So that's the value proposition that you're looking at about it. How do you reduce the friction, really? Okay, let's talk to the next slide, which is about clear communication. Speak their language. Oftentimes, when you are building products, you are speaking your own language. Developers are operating in their context. Once you understand their context, you need to kind of inform them in their simple language. Don't leak out your product cryptic language out there in the error messages, for example. So give them direct information, unambiguous, and which is relevant to their task. That's often the challenge, actually. Whether it's docs, whether it's error messages, whether it's release notes, saves hours of frustration. As a developer, I know I look at those things in detail, and if I don't find the information, then I'm scrambling. I'm going Stack Overflow, I'm going GitHub, I'm going look at the code bases, and if I'm not finding in the usual places, then I've lost it. And then you are really, by doing that, you're showing respect for their time and mental load. So for example, an error log that just says, oh, something went wrong, error code 500. I don't know what went wrong. So can you tell me more? Or you can say error code 500, invalid JSON payload, expected this field, which is missing. And boom, that right away kind of elevates your direct communication with the developer. And they're like, aha, my JSON schema is incorrect. And bonus point, if you add a link in the doc section that explains the schema, that, okay, look at the schema over here. Now I can structure my JSON accordingly. And right away, it makes a big difference. And then the last pillar for developer empathy, if you go to the next slide, is really active listening. And this, to me, really is very, very important. It's probably the most important part. Empathy doesn't stop at launch. When you are building the product, when you're designing the product, when the product is launched, That's when you're listening to customer, asking for feedback and acting on it. The framework that I usually apply is you listen to the feedback, you reflect that this is what I heard, and then you act upon it. When developers tell you that something is broken, if you actually close the loop saying that, hey, you know what? You told me this feature is broken. I went back to the engineering team. I fixed the feature, and the feature is now available here in the product. You try it. That's what builds trust. And that really make the developers want to work with you more and more. Think about this. Developers have been asking for a support for a particular feature for, say, over a year, but it keeps getting ignored. Are you collecting feedback? Yes. Are you acting on it? So think about those kind of stories and how does it align with you. Um, the thread across all four pillars, if you recognize, is really about respecting developers' time, context, and you're not building for them, you're building with them. Take them along in the journey, and they will feel a lot more appreciated for you in that case. Okay. So let's talk about why all of this matters, really. And this really goes back to your GTM PLG cycle, right? So you start with empathy. You have empathy, you're working with the developers, building it with them. That empathy really leads to adoption. And then the adoption is, where the developers are trying out the product, they really start engaging with the product. Then you think about retention, that okay, how many developers are going to continue using the product, and at some point of time these developers actually become your champions. So now they are the advocate of your product, and that advocacy is when they are spreading the word around the world, is what leads to growth. And as you see growth across a diverse set of audience, then these developers give you more feedback, and then you go back into that empathetic mode. So this is what creates that PLG cycle for it, right? So think in that language. Developers are the first to try new tools. They're the ones who decide if something makes into production. If they love your product, they'll bring it into their org, tell their peers about it, and build on top of it. This is exactly how PLG works. You really think about need to remove the need for a sales call by making the product so good and frictionless that your adoption really spreads very naturally. Okay. So empathy creates smooth onboarding and early wins. I'm going to repeat this, which drives adoption. Adoption fuels dev advocacy. Devs telling about you. Advocacy leads to retention because they're invested, and that drives growth. And that means more opportunities to build empathy, and the loop repeats. It's just the loop keeps going on. Keep this in mind. Adoption, retention, advocacy, growth, empathy. Boom, boom, boom. You just keep going in that loop, essentially. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about what are the 5 pillars. If you go to the next slide, what are the 5 pillars of product-led growth? That was the PLG cycle, but let's talk about the 5 pillars of the product-led growth. So the first pillar really is frictionless user experience and self-service. What that means is you create seamless experiences that enable users to discover, try, purchase, and expand their usage independently while quickly reaching their aha moment. Remember, we talked about 5 minutes to aha. So they come to your website, they should be able to see that aha, within 5 minutes, I'm able to realize this quick hello world. And now you got a developer logged in. You show them a trail map. You build this simple hello world. Aha, now let me help you run this in a Docker container. Oh, you run it in a Docker container. Let me show you how to run this in a Kubernetes container. Show this in a Kind. Show this in a whatever hosted Kubernetes services. So lots of different ways by which it goes about it. It really goes from intuitive onboarding that happens within minutes, not hours. Easy sign up, for example. You can add the social signups, SSOs or minimal forms to remove barriers. I'm a big fan of GitHub code spaces, or Gitpod. One click and everything is deployed for you, and you can ready to start playing with it. Some classic examples of this are really like Canva. Their social login. You go there and you immediate template selection and editing. So within minutes, you are productive right away. And we talked about code spaces. Figma is another example where you could do real-time collaborative design with instant team invites. So yeah, I'm designing on it. I want to invite my team member. They come join me, and the product usage grows across the company because it's just frictionless user experience. The second pillar of PLG is really about value-based monetization. And what that is how the revenue growth happens from product usage patterns. As the product is being used in different directions, the monetization feels like a continuation of the product experience rather than, oh, you know what? I can't use the product. I'm going to go call the sales team now, and now I can continue using the product. A very classic example of that is Zoom, a free 40-minute meeting. You want to go to the 41st minute, click here, upgrade, and boom, no sales call required. Same thing with Google Meet, 1 hour free. But you want to go 1 hour, 1 minute, click here, upgrade, no sales call required. So very seamless, just an extension. Yeah, I want to keep there are 90 people on the call. I want to keep the call going. I'm just going to extend and buy the product. And what this really means is usage-based pricing. So your costs scale with value delivered, whether it's storage, whether it's API costs, whether it's seats, whatever it is, right? You set up smart capacity limits. Free tiers, Zoom has a free tier, and clear upgrade prompts when limits are reached. Feature gating, you could say the simple features are available, but advanced capabilities unlocked with paid plans. Instant upgrades. So with Zoom, you click and you get a membership, and that's it. You continue going over there. So again, no interruption over there. Dropbox, again, another example. Storage limits, prompts, additional space purchases, and then you're ready to roll, essentially. So those are the kind of fun things that you think about. Customers are the developers are realizing value, and they are able to, you are able to realize monetization as part of it. All right, let's go to the next slide. Data-driven optimization. What this is continuous product improvement driven by user behavior analytics. Very, very critical, because whatever the user is doing is what is driving your optimization. So you're really focusing on removing friction and enhancing value delivery. So what do you do with that? So the way you track this is, you track activation rates. You see what features are being adopted, what are the churn patterns, and then based upon that, you kind of minimize the friction over there. You map user journeys to identify drop-off points that, oh, you know what? As the developers are going through the website, here are the places where they're not finding the next intuitive path, and that's where I lose them. You try A/B testing, for onboarding, and then you figure out which one works better for you. You maintain feedback loops between usage data and product decisions. So as you're getting that A/B testing data, you go back to the product folks that, okay, we tried A, we tried B, A works better, let's double down on that kind of thing. And very classic example of that are companies like Netflix and Spotify, by using viewing listening patterns to optimize recommendations and interface design. The Lolomo, as Netflix called it, as list of movies, the Lolomos on your Netflix homepage, it kind of keeps changing, evolving based upon what you've been seeing, and it knows your usage pattern, and it gives you recommendations accordingly. Let's go to the next slide, which is about built-in growth mechanisms. How do you drive that part of it? Now, this is basically natural expansion through collaboration features, sharing capabilities, and network effect that make the product more valuable as usage grows. A classic example is Slack. Maybe Slack is available to one of the teams, but all of your members are members of the Slack, but they're not on the Slack channel. You tag somebody and they get invited, and it's just a built-in growth mechanism. It just starts growing. Or Loom, you create a video and you share the video with somebody. They can watch a part of it, but if they want to watch a bigger video or they want to do something about it, they got to get the membership of it as well. So these are built-in growth mechanisms, essentially. The primary idea here is how do you have collaboration features, shared workspaces that really require team invites, very easy sharing. I can share a Zoom link to anybody that, okay, here is a Zoom recording, for example. You take a look at it, and, aha, I like this. Then I may want to get a Zoom account as well. So public links, templates, and exports that users want to share. You create referral incentives. So you provide a reward for bringing others onto the platform. And you even provide social proof, visible team activity, and usage indicators. So these are the built-in growth mechanisms that you can create within the tool in order for the product to grow. And then let's go to the last part of the fifth pillar of the PLG, which is the user-centric product development. And I would go back that this is probably the most important. Having that developer empathy is super, super critical here. A deep understanding of user needs drive your product decisions. So you're creating a virtuous cycle where your satisfied users are really becoming advocates who fuel further growth and provide valuable insights. So you keep going that cycle again and again. You're getting the regular user feedback, you're collecting it, you're analyzing it. When you're doing a feature development, is problem first, that what is the problem that you need to solve. More often than not, I've seen companies get attached to, oh, we build this solution and we want to find a problem for it. You want to find a problem that the customer needs to be solved and try to solve that problem, as opposed to putting your solution on top of a problem. And continuous validation of product market fit is super important. All right, super cool. So let's jump on to how this PLG flywheel really works like. Okay. Now we've talked about all of these mechanisms. And if you see here, the PLG flywheel, the way it works. So if you have a frictionless user experience and service, this leads to, say, easy sharing, which drives viral growth. And that leads to built-in growth mechanisms. I'm going on the right side. Then growth mechanisms happen. You have more data-driven optimization. You inform the user-centric decisions. Then you do more user-centric product development, and it goes back to the loop, because that's what is making a frictionless user experience. Similarly, because it's a frictionless user experience, you have a create natural upgrade monetize moments. It leads you to value-based monetization. And then you recognize that, oh, these are the places where users are really monetizing. And then that goes to data-driven monetization, and it completes the loop. So the whole idea is these pillars are really tied to each other. And that's what you got to stay focused on. Okay. And this is a critical one as well, more often underlooked. Okay. So the important part here is these are soft skills that you really, really need for developer empathy. Type in, what do you think is the most important skill here for developer empathy? Type in the chat, what do you think is the most important skill? And I would love to hear some of the ideas here, what you folks think. Reflective listening is one, patience, EQ, genuine curiosity, collaboration, perspective taking. These are all fantastic. These are all really good suggestions. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. And these are all very important skills. Patience, as somebody said, super important, because you can't be out of patience. You got to listen to the customer. Emotional intelligence, where again, you're not trying to slap your solution on them, but you are having that emotional intelligence. No, I'm going to listen to them carefully and understand what their problem is. Psychological safety is super important, because the customer should feel that, oh, their feedback is valued as opposed to being completely ignored. Genuine curiosity is very important, because what you're doing is you are going there with a genuine curiosity as opposed to with your preconceived notion. To me, frankly, the most important of this is really reflective listening. And that is radical approach. And the reason I say radical is because reflecting listening is a technique by which you listen with an intent to understand as opposed to intent to answer. That's the critical part. Once again, reflective listening is listening with intent to understand than to answer. Okay. So you're really trying to understand deep what the customer wants, what the developer wants, and then you reflect back on them, and then you just keep going on that. So again, some of the soft skills that you really, really need for developer empathy. So let's go to the next slide here. So if I were to kind of wrap it up in terms of what all do you need for developer empathy, really, you have a technical foundation at the bottom, intuitive APIs, clear docs and examples, simple deployments, helpful error messages, embedded developer workflows. All of that is super critical. On top of that, what you have is your soft skills, because as you're interacting with the customer, whether it's in a forum, whether it's in a Slack, whether it's in a Discord, whether it's in an event, whether it's a meetup, or whether it's a thing like this, wherever you're listening, you're always representing your company. You're always trying to build that relationship. You're always trying to create that trust, be friendly with that. And if both of those happens, then on top of that, the PLG automatically happens, because the developer satisfaction happens, the retention happens, the organic growth through advocacy happens, the users become your promoters. So your NPS scores automatically goes up. So let's kind of wrap it up here. If I go to the next slide here. And this is an article that I wrote a few weeks ago. As you're trying to build a developer community, right? And your developer community could be in different stages. So if you think in that language, whether you're trying to build from 0 to 100K, 100K to 1 million, million to 5 million, actually not 1 million to 5 million. Actually, oh, wait, hold on. The numbers are a little bit messed up. So 1 million to 5 million, 5 million to 10 million, 10 to 50 million, and then 50 to 100 million. The metrics are a bit different. The actions are a bit different. The leading and the lagging indicators are a bit different. So that's the way we got to think about it. And it gives you an idea, it gives you a framework, and it gives you multiple examples how companies grow up from there. So this is an article on my LinkedIn profile, but it gives you an overall idea here. So for example, when you're trying to build the community from ground up, you want to focus on time to value. 5 minutes is what you got. 5 minutes. Are you able to recognize? Is the developer able to recognize the value? Is there a 30-day retention? Is 60% of the users are you retaining, or there is a very high churn rate that only 5% of the developers are staying with the product? Then maybe it's not a product market fit. So those are the kind of things that you got to start thinking about it. There's a very detailed article on my LinkedIn profile for this. I would recommend reading that, and that gives you a broader idea of how do you operationalize this. And there is a bit of a discussion, because particularly if you're starting new from 0 to 100K, that's a large jump. Oftentimes 0 to 10K itself is a pretty massive jump. So there's a bit of a side discussion happening on this article on how do you do that? Like, how do you, in the very early stages, it's very founder-led discovery. How do you have only essential docs, and how do you build your DevRel strategy to grow into that mechanism? All right, let me wrap it up with the last slide here. What is your call to action? I really believe in action, habit, character, and destiny. That loop, that is super important. Whatever your simple action is, that leads to a habit, that leads to your character, and that becomes your destiny. So tomorrow, think about, find one developer, sit with them while they try your product. Don't say anything. Let them go to your website. Say, you know what, I want you to try our product. Don't tell them at all anything, because let them come with their preconceived mindset. Write down every moment of friction and ask them to think loud. That, oh, the website, I don't know how to find the website. Oh, is it .dev? Is it .io? Is it .com? Write down every moment of friction. Fix one thing. Kobe Bryant made a code, and he says, imagine you get up tomorrow morning and you just get 1% better. Next morning you get up, you try to be 1% better. Next morning you get up, you try to be 1% better. You will be one heck of a basketball player in a year. Imagine that, applying that to your product. You just fix one friction tomorrow morning. The next morning you fix up one friction. Well, you can, one is a metaphor, but you can fix more than that. But think about it this way. So as a closing, what I would like to say is, as a runner, I love this proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So developer empathy is really all about going far. So take the developers on your journey, build something so well suited so that your developers choose to take the journey with you. And when that happens, growth automatically happens. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed giving this talk.
Great. Thank you, Arun. I always say that empathy is the key to good design, no matter what you're designing, whether it's a UX or a product itself. I appreciate this. I think your talk here definitely is going to resonate with a lot of audiences. Definitely resonates with me for Instruqt specifically. We got a question here in the chat I do want to ask you before we get into some other questions. What would you say to someone who doesn't realize that he or she actually needs more empathy?
That's a hard one, right? How do you bootstrap somebody?
Yeah.
I think to me, really, it comes down to, you got to understand their framework. So I would be rather a bit more empathetic towards that person. That, do you need empathy? Do you not need empathy? Yeah. Understanding, and maybe empathy is not the term to use with them. You got to think about it that end of the day, you are in a commercial business driving product, right? Driving the growth of the product, making sure that the developers buy more of your services. So that is what we are all aligned towards. And the way to say is that, folks, this is what we want to get to. These are the friction points. This is what needs to be removed. So make it, kind of break it down, operationalize it for them. And once you operationalize it for them, then they start understanding it better. And once they see that, aha, when I remove this friction point, I make my website more intuitive. Okay, I got it. Oh, I reduce my time to first hello world from 3 hours to 5 minutes, and I'm seeing a boatload of users coming to my website. Aha, yeah. I get it. So I think if you talk in that language, oftentimes empathy has a bit of a warm and fuzzy feeling, and it's a bit of a Buddhist monk phrase. So what I found it very helpful is operationalizing it. That, okay, folks, this is what we need to do to get more customers, and that starts vibing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think people can oftentimes get hung up on the word, and if you reframe it around maybe the outcomes that
Exactly.
it drives, people have a much easier time understanding it. Quick question here from Dorothy. I don't want to go too into a bunch of examples, but is there an example that's top of mind, kind of about how one of your teams has applied these strategies in your career?
Oh, all the time, all the time. I mean, I think about developer empathy every day, every day. That's the only way I've operated, frankly. Last year at Intel, we launched this project called as OPIA, Open Platform for Enterprise AI. And I was talking to the product team on a regular basis, and my team was responsible for building the ecosystem for OPIA. And we recognized that developers were not really jumping onto the product right away. And I recognized that, okay, let me be empathetic towards that approach, and let me come in as a fresh developer and see what am I seeing at the website. And when I started looking at the website, I said, oh my God, this is so confusing. I understand why the developers are not getting it. So when I started following the docs, it was very cryptic, internal file system names, and a lot of the leaky terminology was out on the website in terms of the docs. And they were using the cryptic terminology that a normal developer coming in would never understand. There were no like Git pod, Git code spaces, anything of that sort that, okay, click here and everything is deployed for you. It was a complex setup. There were like 10 different microservices you got to deploy, and how do you get it up and running? So what we did is we went through, like I said, okay, folks, this is not working. So we ran like a 2.5 week sprint, and every morning we met for about half an hour and was okay, these are the docs problem that I'm noticing. And again, it was not emotional reaction. It was like, okay, here are 20 problems that I've seen with the docs, and we need to fix this to bring more developers on board. So what we did is we ran like a 2.5 week sprint, and I led the sprint essentially with my team, with product and QE and folks and customer success engineers and everybody else together. And we said, we got to fix the docs. And in a very mechanical manner, we created a simplified doc version. Now you could say, hey, our target developers were hyperscale developers. So we created those 5 different tabs: Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, IBM. On all these clouds, you can click here and deploy this in your environment. And that really improved the overall product experience. So yeah, developer empathy is something that you don't do on I'm doing a developer empathy exercise. You do this on every day, every moment, and you are the voice of the customer inside the engineering team.
Awesome. Great. Another question from Dorothy, actually. We've got some of our own, but I'll keep going to the chat here. So can we assign developer empathy responsibilities to UX researchers in our team, as they already help us with identifying and rectifying similar pain points, but from customer side, customer end?
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful question. I believe developer empathy is everybody's collective responsibility, because UX researchers, if they are defining your Figma designs, etc., so that is only from the UI responsibility. What about the SDKs? What about the APIs? What about the docs? What about the tutorials? If they are really in charge of all of that as well, then I would give it. But otherwise, developer empathy is a very collective responsibility across. Just like security is a collective responsibility. Oh, these are security people and they do security. It doesn't work like that. So it's really a collective responsibility, because developer empathy is prevalent everywhere. What are the touch points? What are the value-based monetizations you're going to recognize? That is something that the product manager can define, and then the engineering team has to build. So I think it's a very collective responsibility.
Awesome. Great. And I see somebody else commented here, TEA, thought, emotion, action. I think that's a good equation that we can use here for empathy as well.
That's correct.
All right, we got a few minutes here, so let's jump into some more. Again, if you in the audience have questions, feel free to add them in the chat or in the questions option that's in there as well. So how about this one? If you had 1 hour to find and fix the top sources of developer drop-off, what would you inspect first, and what's the fastest fix?
Yeah, I would go back to the slide that I presented earlier, 8 reasons developers abandon your product, right? And the call to action as well. So really, watch a user, log every friction moment, fix one thing tomorrow, right? Usually the most significant impact that I've seen is with the time to first hello world. How long that takes. You know, bring an external user who has never used your product and say, I want you to try this. And let them try the time to first hello world and see how long it takes. It should not be more than 5 minutes. I mean, 5 minutes is a metaphor in the sense, but it should be really quick and crisp. One single click, one single command, and it should be up and going. Do a developer study, create a friction log, make that product priority, fix broken or outdated examples. That is a big pain point, when the examples don't work. And if you're blocking people with credit card walls or long approvals, drop them a free tier or limited trial. Let's get them started. So think about multiple ways by which you're attracting developers and bringing them on board to get started. Don't create artificial barriers is my suggestion.
Jumping to the next question here. So obviously we're talking about getting hands-on today. It's the name of our event here. But in terms of maybe those 8 reasons that people drop off, that developers drop off, or your product adoption fails, how does developer empathy translate to the hands-on nature of those experiences?
Yeah. So when I say shorten time to hello world, for example, you can offer one-line installs. npm install, boom, my hello world is up and running. Give them a GitHub code spaces, Git pod instance, click and ready to run. So that's a good one. You can remove setup. What is your SLA, right? World is on 24/7. Are you curating that community? You need to be very intentional to curate that community. What are the feedback mechanisms you are building? And if the developers are telling you that, hey, I tried this example, goes back to the empathy part of it. If you're watching that forum, that I tried this feature of the product, I tried this SDK, I tried this API, and this is not working for me, log that as an issue. Give the developers an ability to log an issue in your product roadmap, and then they can drive it. If the developers are telling you, yeah, Rust and Go and Python are great APIs, but now I need a TypeScript API, bring that in as a product feature priority and drive that product roadmap. See, because as much as DevRel, developer experience, is about telling what your product does well, is equally about bringing that feedback back from the developers into the product and driving that roadmap.
Yeah, I think one of the things we always talk about is show, don't tell. I think when you're trying to build trust and have that empathy, it's much easier when you're actually showing the product and letting people get hands-on, as opposed to just telling them how things are.
Right.
Cool. Let's do one more question. We got a couple minutes here. And it's a good one maybe to finish on here. You mentioned obviously the Kilimanjaro climb. When you're thinking about go-to-market, what is the equivalent of acclimatization and pacing? And how does that reduce the cognitive altitude for developers?
Yeah, I think that's very important, actually. As I was explaining earlier, and it goes back to sort of the 4 pillars of developer empathy. When we were climbing Kilimanjaro, we were started from 6,000, go to 9, 12, 15. And then the last day is a major climb from 15 to 19.3 thousand feet. And every day we are acclimatizing to that altitude so that we can take in more oxygen, essentially. And we are also pacing ourselves, so that we're all chugging along together. And it is directly relevant to developer empathy. When you are talking to developers, don't just go and start telling them your story. Yeah, I'm going to deploy a Kubernetes cluster, and in that Kubernetes cluster, you need a Helm chart, and in that Helm chart, you need these, Istio, and you need these sidecar containers. And the customer is like, what? So that is the acclimatization. Bring them along on the journey. Listen to them first. Understand what their requirements are. Remember that listen, reflect, and ask framework. That is exactly what reduces the cognitive altitude for developers. Listen to them, reflect back on this is what I heard, and ask them the right questions. And that's what really builds, that kind of allows you to pace them, because, or whatever you said, ask them that, hey, I said this, does it make sense to you? If not, then repeat it, then say it in a different way. So I think all of this, without listening to where the developer is in their journey, you're trying to sell them. If you don't educate them, you're not selling at all.
Great. No, I totally agree. All right. Well, we are at time here, Arun. I want to really thank you for your time this morning for this talk. There's definitely a lot of insights in here. Yes, there were a few more questions on the slides we didn't get to. We'll have you answer those in writing maybe, and we'll send those out. But I think a lot of what you talked about today is super relevant. I hope everybody really enjoyed it. And Arun, again, thank you so much for your time.